Revenge films.
My name is Sumire. This is my husband Katsumi, and it's been 2 months since we had our first daughter, Sakura, together. This is obviously my first time raising a child, so I'm figuring things out as I go along, but things have been going decently well so far. My husband works as a salesman, but he's been very busy with work recently. He always comes home late and doesn't have much free time at home. And that's why I've basically been raising Sakura by myself up until this point. And that's taken a huge toll on my physical and mental health. I knew I couldn't do this for much longer. But one day, when I looked at my husband's paycheck, I noticed that he wasn't paid his overtime salary properly. He's been working late virtually every day, so it's weird that he wasn't being compensated for it. And so, when my husband came home that day, I decided to talk to him about his paycheck. Hey, I just saw your paycheck today and noticed that you weren't being paid your overtime salary. Do you know about this?
Yes, I do.
Well, what's up with that? You've been working your ass off for the last couple of months, but you're not being compensated for it? How is that any fair? You have to talk to your boss about this. This has to change.
Well, I don't think that'll make a difference. My workplace is notorious for having terrible working conditions, so...
But you've been getting off work at 11 p.m. recently, when you're supposed to get off at 5:30 p.m. I mean, this is just ridiculous.
I know, and I feel the same way about this, but there's just nothing I can do about it. I'm already being bullied by my boss, so I don't want to make my standing even worse by bringing this up with him.
Wait, really? Is that true, honey?
It is. I didn't want to tell you this because I knew you would worry about me, but I don't think my boss likes me very much.
I didn't know that. That's terrible. How are you holding up? Apparently, his boss and coworkers have been forcing him to do twice the amount of work he's supposed to. And when he doesn't finish everything on time, they make him apologize to everyone and beg them for mercy. I knew his workplace had terrible working conditions, but I didn't know things were this bad. I knew my husband wouldn't be able to keep living like this for much longer, so I decided to convince him to find another job. And a few days later, it was past midnight already, but my husband wasn't back yet. I got worried about him and decided to call his phone. He quickly answered and told me that his bosses are taking him out to a pub. He tried to go home by telling them that his wife and daughter were waiting for him back home, but his bosses couldn't care less about what he had to say. When I heard this, I was furious. I urged him to ignore his bosses and head home, but my husband told me that if he did that, he would just get fired on the spot. And so my husband finally came home around 2 a.m. that night. So you ended up going to the pub with your coworkers, huh?
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. I told them many times that I wanted to go home, but they wouldn't listen to me. They kept on saying that they were gonna fire me if I didn't do as they said.
My husband is an introverted person, so he can't really stand up for himself in these kinds of situations. I became sick to my stomach just imagining him being yelled at by his bosses. So I said this to him. I'm going to call your company tomorrow and tell them that what they're doing is wrong. At this rate, you're not going to be able to spend any time with Sakura.
Stop! You don't have to do that for me, all right? I'll be fine. So please, just don't do anything.
But this isn't fair.
You guys are the reason I'm doing this, and that's enough to keep me going.
Katsumi. Katsumi was obviously trying his best to fake a smile, and seeing him like this made me burst out in tears. And so, my husband kept on coming home late every night because his bosses refused to let him go home without first making him grab a few drinks with them. I was starting to get worried about his physical health, but when I brought the matter up with him, he just smiled and told me that he was fine. It was obvious that he was just trying to act tough, and I bet that because he didn't want to defy his bosses. But one day, Katsumi's mother, who hadn't seen his son in months, grew worried about Katsumi and decided to call me. And so, on the call, I decided to talk to her about what Katsumi had been going through lately. She then told me that I should call one of his bosses and leave a complaint. So I did exactly that. After getting off the call with my mother-in-law, I called Katsumi's workplace, ready to leave a scathing complaint. When the call was connected to one of his bosses, I was surprised by how nice and sincere he sounded. And when I told him about how my husband hadn't been receiving his overtime pay and how his bosses had been abusing him, he sounded utterly bewildered. He then told me that he would call me back and hung up from the phone call. A few minutes later, I got a call from him again, and he told me that he wanted to hear my story again in detail. When I told my mother-in-law about all of this, she sensed that something was off, and she and her husband rushed over to my place even though we lived 2 hours away. My in-laws were worried about their son's health, and they told me that they were prepared to start a lawsuit against his company if things got to that point. I felt better knowing that they had my back. And so, I asked my in-laws to look after my daughter for me and headed over to the cafe where I was supposed to meet up Katsumi's boss to talk about my husband's situation. The cafe was right beside my house, so it didn't take long for me to get there. And when I arrived, Katsumi's boss was already down at one of the tables waiting for me. When I went up to him to greet him, he bowed politely and handed me his business card. Then, he asked me to explain my husband's situation in detail, so I did exactly that. I told him everything, from how he wasn't being compensated properly for his work, to how he was coming home past midnight every night. And after I was done, he paused awkwardly and said this to me.
Well, to tell you the truth, we don't allow our employees to work overtime. Your husband has never been in the office past 6 p.m. and has a great relationship with his bosses and peers as well. As far as I know, he's not being abused or bullied by any of them.
Wait, really?
And the reason he isn't being paid for his overtime hours is because, well, it's because he has none.
So you're telling me that he's lying to me?
That's right. Oh, and there's one more thing I should tell you.
What is it?
I don't know how to put this, but there's this rumor about your husband that's been spreading around in the office recently.
A rumor?
That's right. We've received multiple reports that he's in a romantic relationship with one of his co-workers. We knew that he was married, so we decided to conduct an investigation into the matter, and...
That's when Katsumi's boss pulled out his iPad and showed me a couple of photos. In one of the photos, Katsumi was holding hands with a young woman. It looked like they were going into an apartment building together. And in that moment, I realized that my husband had been lying to me all along. He wasn't working overtime. He was just cheating on me with one of his coworkers. I can't believe that he would do this to me. He blamed his workplace for all of his problems. All the while, he was out cheating on me. I was overcome with rage and sadness, and tears started flowing out of my eyes. We just had our first child together. But now he's cheating on me? I can't believe he would do this to me.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. These photos were submitted to us as part of an anonymous report, but we'll send them over to you right away. They might come in handy later.
And after I received the photos from Katsumi's boss, I headed back home where my in-laws were waiting for me. When I showed the photos and explained everything to them, my mother-in-law broke down in tears. My father-in-law apologized to me repeatedly and told me that he was going to make things right for me. He then immediately called his son and told him to come back home. I guess Katsumi was able to tell that something was wrong from the tone of his voice, because he got back in a huge hurry. By the time he arrived back home, though, I had already packed my bags.
Well, wait, what's going on? Why are you guys here? Did something happen?
And that's when my mother-in-law slapped her son's face as hard as she could.
Ow! What the hell was that for?
I can't believe you would cheat on your wife when you guys just had your first daughter. You better apologize to Sumire right now.
Come on, what are you waiting for? Apologize to her!
What? What are you guys talking about right now?
And so I showed him the photos I received from his boss and told him about everything that had happened that day. That's when his face turned completely pale. After standing there for a couple of seconds, not knowing what to do or say, he got down on his knees and started apologizing to me.
I am so sorry, honey. I don't know what I was doing. I'll never cheat on you again, so please forgive me.
Do you know how much pain and suffering you put me through? I trusted you, and you betrayed me. I was worried about your health, you know. How could you do this to me?
I know, and I'm sorry. I'm gonna make sure I help you with the chores from now on, so please forgive me.
What are you talking about? It's too late for that. I can't keep on living with someone that would do this to me. Sumire, I am so sorry about my son.
I'm gonna cut ties with you completely, you bastard. You're an embarrassment, and I never want to see you again.
And so, my in-laws drove me to my parents' house and apologized to me for their son's behavior. Tatsumi kept on begging me for forgiveness over the phone, but I wasn't willing to forgive him. I told him that I never wanted to see him again and blocked his number. My parents were also furious at Katsumi and made him compensate me for the emotional damage I incurred from this incident. We're also launching a lawsuit against him and his girlfriend to make them compensate me for the divorce. Fortunately, we had immovable evidence of their affair, so things went pretty smoothly. He ended up having to pay me an absurd amount of money since this incident occurred when we just had our first child. Thankfully, I won't have to look for a job for a while. I'll be able to sustain myself just from the money I won in the lawsuit. Oh yeah, and my husband and his girlfriend ended up getting fired from their jobs as well. I had already received the entirety of Sakura's child support from him at that point, so I had nothing to worry about. And after losing a lot of money in the lawsuit, he forced his girlfriend to compensate him for everything that he had to go through. But it's not like he was able to get enough money to support himself from her. So now, he's working at a construction site day and night to make ends meet. On the other hand, my life has been on the up and up ever since I got a divorce from Katsumi. My parents have supported me throughout the divorce process and have been willing to look after my daughter for me while I rested my body and soul. And now that I don't have to raise my daughter all by myself, I'm going to make sure that I provide for and protect my daughter at all costs.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.